staying down south, now we're going to go to Fort Worth, Texas, in Warren County for Texas State Senate District 9. Now, in this special election, this was triggered on because Kelly Hancock, the former state senator for District 9, wound up vacating the seat to become Texas commissioner, and that is a statewide position. So in this election, there were 3 candidates running as well, but this time there were 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat. The Democratic candidate, Taylor Rehmet, won in the special election on November 4th, and then we had 2 other Republicans, Lee Wamgins, who is a self-avowed Christian nationalist, okay? And then the third candidate, the other Republican, John Huffman. Now, Taylor Rehmet won with 47% of the vote. Lee Wamgins got 35% of the vote, and John Huffman got 16% of the vote. Now, between the 3 of them, while Taylor Rehmet won the plurality of votes, again, special elections in Texas require a majority, 50% plus 1, so that triggered a runoff. And this runoff is where we saw Taylor Rehmet and Lee Wamgins compete on January 31st. Now, just for some context here, who is Taylor Rehmet? How come this Democrat decided to run in a ruby red district where President Trump won this district by 14 points in 2024 against former VP Kamala Harris? And fast forward, we've seen this this district has not voted for a Democrat in generations. It's been years, decades upon decades. So because of that, it's pretty wild to see that a Democrat even got 47% in the special election. And in this runoff, Taylor Rehmet did even better. So, lo and behold, how did Taylor Rehmet do it? Well, he wound up pulling off 57% of the final vote in the runoff, beating Lee Wamgins by 42% of the vote, right? So that is not only a 15-point difference, but that is a 31-point swing going from Trump, Republican, to Taylor Rehmet, Democrat, from 2024 to 2026. And even better is this is history making in a community that is self-avowed Christian nationalist, ruby red Republican, and they supported the Democrat. How did he do it? So first off, let's just talk about Taylor Rehmet. 33 years old, millennial, joined the Air Force when he was 19. He grew up in and was raised in that area of Texas. With that said, he understood the community, he lived through it, and growing up, he said he was a Republican. So fast forward, he had a change of heart, became a Democrat, right? But nonetheless, he also got involved in his union. He joined the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers. He even became the president of his local chapter. So he already had experience running, building relationships, and also organizing around issues. Now, fast forward, that is what helped him not only win this election, but he was a first-time candidate. So he had no prior experience running an election or running a campaign, let alone winning. So this was huge. Now, more importantly, right, he used his personal experience to really inform his campaign platform, but also his messaging. So what was really fascinating was one was that we knew he was a vet. He joined the Air Force, right? So he wound up working with the Vote Vets group, and they donated $500,000 to his campaign in independent expenditures, meaning that a lot of what they paid for him covered a lot of his campaign costs. And because of that, he was able to compete. He wound up fundraising $718,000, whereas Lee Wamgins, she wound up raising $736,000. So she outraised him. Not by much, but she still did. However, Taylor Rehmet had the union experience. And that is so important because at a time when wealth inequality is super high, unions are slowly getting traction with more membership growth around the country. But more importantly, the cost of living is hurting union members and laborers in this country who are doing the work to build and better their communities and the work around them. So the fact that he could speak to their issues and he gained their trust, that is phenomenal. Until Rehmet put an extra focus on affordability. His campaign messaging, his campaign website, right? He focused on the bread and butter issues. And he was even sharing in interviews how he talked about voters were telling him their stories, how some had to choose between the rent to pay or paying for their cancer treatment. These are like the situations they were dealt with because of the lack of care and the lack of their representatives trying to pay attention to them. Their representatives go off and make money, whereas like their constituents are struggling. So the fact that Taylor Rehmet really wanted to put a focus on delivering and fighting for them, that speaks volumes. So even regardless of their Christian nationalist ideology, they prioritized the delivering on the material conditions that would change their lives drastically. And for a working class community like that, he was able to speak to them in a way that other candidates were not. Taylor Rehmet even said he did not lecture, he listened. Now I bring that up because it sounds very familiar from someone else I know. Taylor Rehmet, union worker, former Republican, young millennial, but still ran on an affordability-focused message, just like New York City Mayor Zoran Kwame Mamdani, Democratic Socialist, Muslim, immigrant, progressive, and millennial, who is now leading the nation's largest city. And again, both of them ran similar campaigns focused on affordability. We know the cost of living is high. We know the Trump administration has done nothing adequately to actually lower the cost of living. So the fact that both Zoran, a Democrat in New York City, and Taylor Rehmet, Democrat in Fort Worth, Texas, Warren County, were able to connect the dots with the issues plaguing their communities and essentially win their elections, making history. The political poetry writes itself. But also, I do want to share one other point that made it possible for Taylor Rehmet to win his election. Now, I know progressives and Democratic Socialists generally criticize the No Kings demonstrations. But I'm going to say right here on this podcast, these No Kings demonstrations is what helped Taylor Rehmet win his election in ruby red Warren County. Why do I say that? Now, we know in New York City, right, people flood the streets. We had a huge demonstration. We had hundreds of thousands of people come out, which is great. I attended the No Kings demonstrations. I consider myself a Democratic Socialist, a progressive, someone who's involved, high information voter, someone who takes democracy so seriously. I'm not necessarily a liberal, a vote blue no matter who type at all, but I will say I believe in the power of those demonstrations. Sure, the critique that folks say is that they don't give any demands. They're very based on the surface level, right? There's nothing to extract or demand more from Democratic leadership to really force a change that is very much needed in this country. I completely understand. And I agree. We should be demanding more, especially from our elected officials and our leaders. The fact that we are now in a very desperate time while fascism is taking over our country, we need to be doing everything we can. However, I also agree that the demonstrations, their sole purpose isn't to make demands. Their sole purpose, their biggest purpose that I find valuable, is to change the culture. Now, what I mean by that is, if you really think about it, No Kings demonstrations brought people off their phones and off the couch. I'm literally sitting on my couch as I do this podcast, but it's taking them off the couch and into the streets. And it's showing people everywhere that Americans care about the future of this country. We care about our community and people getting kidnapped and kidnapped and harmed violently in the streets. The fact that this is not the country most of us voted for. This is not the vision that we want. So we have to bring it upon ourselves to demonstrate that we want change. So it's really the power of changing the culture and the mindset, empowering people to take more participation in our democracy. So Warren County, remember, Ruby Red District had No Kings demonstrations, bringing people out of their houses into the streets, knowing they were a minority of the community. That is bravery. It's one thing to be in New York City where there are like millions of Democrats, right? But it is another to be in a ruby red district, putting your lives on the line when you know people out there can be so harmful and hateful and just mean because you're a Democrat or because you don't support President Trump. But a group of brave members of that state Senate District 9 came out in support because they knew it was the right thing to do. And because of that, and remember, this demonstration was October, Taylor Remet's election was in November. It is no coincidence that Democrats felt empowered, they felt strong, they felt connected, they felt safe. They felt like their voice and their voice mattered, and they were going to show that in our democracy. So they did. Granted, Taylor Remet and Lee Wamskins, they competed in the special election in November, and then again in the runoff. Now, here's the thing. Republicans are trying to play it off like, oh, it was bad weather, and that's why Taylor Remet won, because the weather made it so that people couldn't vote. We have the numbers to prove that is a lie. It is a bold-faced lie. Back in November, Taylor Remet won with 56,000 votes. In January, he earned 54,000 votes. So he only lost 2,000 voters between November and January. Literally the same thing happened on the Republican side. Lee Wamskins, she lost 2,000 voters between November and January. But what happened to the 19,000 voters who supported John Huffman? Well, it's not like 19,000 voters got caught in a snowstorm or anything, because clearly they all made it to the polls. They didn't all come over to support Lee Wamskins. So, like, the fact that 19,000 voters stayed home, right? That speaks volumes. And it's not because of the weather. It's because their preferred candidate wasn't on the ballot. So they had no reason to go support, which speaks volumes, because if the if another Republican candidate wasn't on the ballot, they weren't even there to support the party. Like, Lee Wamskins was supported by Donald Trump. So the fact that even those Republicans from John Huffman didn't come out to vote, that is a rejection of what the Republican leadership put forward on the ballot, because the other Republican voters got her in. So, like, the fact that she the fact that she was able to not win the runoff, but she was able to get onto the runoff, like, wow. But then no one else supported her? Ouch. But even more so, back in 2022, the last time that there was an election for State Senate District 9, there were 126,000 more Republican voters. So the fact that 126,000 voters stayed home, that speaks the most volumes, right? In a special election, 126,000 voters decided to not show up to support the Republican. And that is mostly because they are not happy with the current Republican Party. Like, they could have voted. They chose not to. They didn't show up in November and again in January, so it wasn't really the weather. Republicans are not happy with the current administration and the current party. So that speaks for itself. But at the end of the day, I want to give a huge congratulations to Taylor Remet, who used his organizing power and his experience as a union member, veteran, to not only speak to his community, but empower them to vote, thanks to the momentum brought by the No Kings demonstrations. So I strongly support the No Kings demonstrations. I think they are good for our democracy. They clearly are helping win elections in this case. And honestly, I want to have more people participate the next time around. So the next demonstration is March 28th. Mark your calendars, March 28th, for No Kings demonstrations around the country. Last time there were about 7 million participants. Let's try to increase that number so we can send a huge message to everyone else around the country and the fascist regime and our government, saying that this is not the America we want and we deserve better. Congratulations, Taylor Remet. I cannot wait to see what he does in the Texas State Senate. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like what you heard and want to learn more, make sure to subscribe to Not Suitable for Democracy on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Or you can follow along on Instagram and TikTok. I use the same handle for both, so make sure to follow along at nsfd_pod. Take care, and remember, democracy is not suitable without you.